The basement air tightened as the evidence clerk lifted the dusty, unmarked box, revealing the old tape recorder sealed in plastic, its red tag faded but unmistakably tied to a vanished life. The room's fluorescent hum felt louder, as if the past strained to speak again in that silent archive. If you like stories like this, make sure to subscribe and like the video. The rediscovery of the recorder in New Haven's municipal storage facility did not ignite immediate headlines, but it marked the quiet return of a case whose unresolved tension had lingered since the spring of 1993. The old device, its spool intact and magnetic strip undisturbed, stood as the only surviving primary artifact from the disappearance of a 22-year-old Yale School of Architecture student named Elena Ward. Her file had been thinned through time, photocopies fading into illegible gray, ink eroded by humidity. What remained was a calendar of interviews, scattered reference notes, and the final cassette, unplayed since it was logged 30 years earlier. New Haven in 1993 was in transition, reshaping its industrial edges while the university core remained stately and insulated. Chapel Street storefronts carried the scent of roasted coffee and paper textbooks, while one block over, boarded windows and cracked curbstones revealed a more vacant economy. The late March weather had been unpredictable that year. Sleet one morning, crisp sun by afternoon, and oceanic dampness from the harbor settling into brick foundations by dusk. Students hurried between studios, and young professionals navigated narrow one-way streets that fed into Interstate 95. The city was neither dangerous nor safe, neither bustling nor deserted. It existed in the middle ground where chance encounters and unnoticed departures occurred without narrative. The official record named March 25, 1993, as the date when Elena failed to appear for a scheduled final review. She had left her apartment on Howe Street the night prior, last seen carrying tracing paper tubes and a borrowed tape recorder she used for field audio notes. She was known for precise observational recordings, documenting architectural acoustics and sound mapping city corridors for her thesis on historic preservation. When she did not check in, initial concern was attributed to academic exhaustion. By the third day, her faculty advisor called police, and a missing person report was issued. Xeroxed flyers appeared on lampposts, the tone restrained but urgent, her photograph centered above contact information. Local news treated the case with neutral formality. The original investigation interviewed classmates who recalled she had been cataloging adaptive reuse projects near the old Winchester factory site. That neighborhood between Dixwell and the rail lines possessed large empty brick structures, their windows punched out, rusted hinges exposed to the coastal air. She had spoken about capturing ambient sound from those hollowed spaces, how echoes revealed architectural memory. Police canvassed, but security logs were inconsistent. The warehouse custodial staff had no signed entries correlating with her timeline. A grounds worker remembered seeing someone with a recorder but could not confirm identity. No sign of struggle, no abandoned belongings, no vehicle traces were found. The case stalled within 6 months. The tape recorder, though collected, had never been transcribed. The technology at the time made it burdensome. Its microcassette format required specialized playback to preserve audio integrity. The detective who logged it retired in 1998, his notation small but legible. Do not reuse, potential evidence, chain intact. It sat across 3 decades of municipal reorganization, a silent witness to procedural prioritization. When the Cold Case Unit reactivated files in 2023 due to grant funding for archival digitization, Elena's name resurfaced. Not because new leads emerged, but because the recorder was flagged for conversion. A tech specialist, wearing gloves to prevent degradation, initiated the playback. The audio hissed, warped by age but remained intelligible. It was not a confession, not an assault record, not a plea, only her calm documentation of building acoustics. She narrated the timbre of stairwells, the way metallic ducts amplified winter drafts, the resonance of footfalls on timber. Then, near the end, her voice noted an unexpected presence in the factory corridor, a man with keys who said he managed after-hours inspections. She recorded machinery vibration followed by footsteps not her own. The tape ended abruptly without alarm, but the presence of another individual now became the primary investigative pivot. New Haven property records from that period linked facility oversight to a private security contractor, Harbor Industrial Maintenance. Their 1993 staff roster had been dissolved and absorbed into another firm by 1999. Cold case detectives tracked archival tax filings, eventually identifying one named gatekeeper, Andrew F. Lasker, born 1954, who had overseen 3 warehouses including the one Elena had studied. He retired in 2010 and relocated to eastern Connecticut. The case, once dormant, gained a concrete name, though it still lacked proof of wrongdoing. Detectives approached with administrative subtlety, retrieving interview notes from the 1990s that never made it into the evidence ledger. A clerk had stored internal memos separately, and among them lay a 2-sentence notation by the original lead detective. Contacted A. Lasker 4293. Denied knowing student. The brevity of the note indicated a non-event at the time, but juxtaposed with the cassette's audible mention of a building inspector, the contradiction was no longer minor. The investigators reconstructed facility access logs using city utility entries, verifying that on the evening Elena recorded acoustics, an after-hours badge swipe occurred at the north gate. While badge ownership data had expired, the timestamp aligned with an inspection route historically assigned to Lasker. The reanalysis extended into environmental trace evidence. Though Elena's personal items were never located, her studio workspace in 1993 remained preserved in university archives. A box of her drafting materials, sealed after the missing person inquiry, included a fragment of insulation dust taped into her notes. Modern forensic spectral analysis determined the dust composition matched a specific fireproofing compound applied only to the Winchester Annex warehouse post-1989 renovation. This confirmed her presence at the site near the date of disappearance. With the audio tape identifying a singular unknown male claiming authority, investigators had enough to obtain a formal interview request. Lasker, now 70, received the inquiry in late summer. He maintained limited recollection, but conceded he performed routine checks in buildings being decommissioned for redevelopment. His employment record documented no disciplinary actions, and he lacked criminal history. The case could have evaporated again under statute and time, but digital conversion uncovered one more recording detail. Faint in the background, beneath the hiss and atmospheric reverb, was a 4-tone chime identifiable as the alarm system unique to that property. Cross-referencing maintenance logs, those chimes occurred only when the building was set from inspection override back to secured, a function accessible solely by authorized personnel. The chime sounded precisely 3 seconds after Elena's final spoken annotation. This timestamp, correlated with the gate card data and audio metadata, constructed a narrow window in which 2 individuals occupied the same sealed facility. Though this alone did not prove malicious intent, it refuted earlier claims of non-contact. Investigators pursued court authorization to search Lasker's archived employment storage, maintained by the successor security firm. Inside were keys, old route maps, and a ledger recording inspection notes. A page dated March 24, 1993, listed the site Elena documented with the handwritten note, Student researcher present, cleared to continue. This entry, never transferred to police in the original inquiry, indicated direct interaction. The discovery did not resolve cause of disappearance, but it definitively placed Lasker with Elena inside an otherwise locked industrial campus. New Haven prosecutors convened a grand jury to determine whether charges could be filed related to obstruction or withholding material contact information in a missing person investigation. For the first time in 30 years, the case carried legal momentum, its quiet details shifting from forgotten papers to active scrutiny. The first public mention came in a September 2023 New Haven Register article. It noted the reopened inquiry, referenced the old recorder, and reminded readers of the posters once hung along Elm Street. Former classmates, now dispersed nationwide, submitted written statements recalling her diligence and caution. The case, while still unresolved, had moved from vacancy to pursuit, each archival layer revealing procedural lapses and overlooked evidence. By the end of that fall, Federal Forensic Audio Enhancement had extracted more ambient detail from the tape. A metallic click preceding the chime was identified as a key cylinder rotation consistent with manual lock engagement. The tape had captured not only presence but building control. With every analytic increment, the chain of events compressed toward accountability, the silent warehouse reverberations now serving as testimony long after their architect in training disappeared. The enhanced recording, now clearly delineating footsteps in sequence with key action and alarm reset, provided investigators with a spatial map of the final documented minutes Elena spent inside the warehouse. Nothing in the audio suggested panic, threat, or struggle, but its forensic value rested not in tone but in precision. Sound decay, echo length, and microphone orientation analysis offered a mathematical reconstruction of corridor length and ceiling height, matching only one wing of the Winchester Annex according to 1992 architectural plans. That corridor, known as Line C, had been temporarily closed to public access due to roof load tests. For Elena to legally enter, someone with clearance needed to escort her or deactivate the alarm grid. The recording revealed that such deactivation occurred, followed by reactivation shortly after her final spoken notation. The cold case unit subpoenaed the original maintenance contracts from Harbor Industrial Maintenance, stored offsite in Hartford. Within that archive, weathered but intact, remained a liability report noting that building access on March 24 and March 25 required dual sign-off due to debris assessments after winter storms. Two signatures appeared. One belonged to Lasker. The second, written in rushed graphite, belonged to a junior site supervisor, deceased since 2004. No record indicated a third entry for outside visitors. Yet Elena's research proposal to Yale documented that she acquired written permission to sound map the structure for her thesis, with the approval of a heritage consultant who liaised with Norwich-based redevelopment advisory boards. That consultant, reached in late 2023, confirmed she directed Elena only to publicly accessible areas and never authorized her into sealed annex segments. A clearer picture materialized through accumulated fragments. Elena, intent on documenting acoustic transitions for preservation analysis, entered a foreclosed industrial complex through a portion temporarily secured for internal inspection. A man with keys and contractual authority encountered her. He reset alarms after she ceased recording. She was never seen again. To understand institutional oversight gaps of the early 1990s, investigators examined city inspection culture. New Haven's industrial conversion boom, driven by university expansion and commercial revitalization, had created overlapping jurisdictions. Code enforcement, private contractors, redevelopment committees, Architectural historians and preservationists often operated parallel rather than coordinated systems. Those who worked in that era described a climate of hurried clearance, where safety sign-offs occurred alongside structural surveys, and where academic researchers occasionally trailed inspectors to gather data. Elena, academically rigorous and ambitious, may have steered beyond the perimeter she was authorized to document, assuming permission where formal approval had not cleared. The man with keys, tasked with building security, may have felt responsible for redirecting her. Or he may have recognized the liability of her presence in a condemned unit. Both narratives coexisted until one could be legally sustained. Reopened interviews with retired officers revealed a procedural oversight that proved decisive. In 1993, no full search of Line C occurred due to incomplete access logs and contradictory maintenance statements. With the annex slated for redevelopment, demolition began in segments between 1994 and 1996. Concrete floors, interior partitions, and mechanical trusses were removed without full forensic clearance, because at that time, Elena's disappearance lacked a criminal designation. Her case was logged as missing with no evidence of foul play. By the time suspicion could have warranted deeper excavation, the corridor she recorded in had already been destroyed. Forensic archaeologists consulted in 2024 confirmed that trace recovery from the site would be impossible 3 decades post-demolition. Soil displacement, commercial rebuild, and traffic vibration along the arterial connection toward State Street had obliterated any remaining contextual markers. What persisted was only the tape, its data preserved within analog hiss. The grand jury hearings, held quietly in a wood-paneled room of the New Haven County Courthouse, dealt not with homicide but with obstruction. The question was simple. Did Lasker, when questioned in April 1993, knowingly withhold material information regarding his encounter with Elena and her presence in a restricted section of the industrial property? His initial denial of familiarity with the student contradicted the ledger entry acknowledging her clearance. The discrepancy, though seemingly clerical, bore significance. Had he disclosed interaction at the time, the search radius would have expanded inside Line C and adjacent inspection tunnels, potentially altering investigative trajectory before demolition, removed physical evidence. Court-appointed analysts testified about the microcassette. Their process had been careful: humidity-controlled playback, frequency cleaning, sound floor suppression, and harmonic analysis. They verified Elena's calm tone, the mechanical lock rotation, the four-tone chime, and the spatial echo consistent with sealed industrial geometry. They could not verify intent, threat, or causal harm, but they could verify presence and sequence. In January 2024, after deliberation, the jury recommended charges not of violent crime, but of negligent withholding of factual encounter data during a missing person inquiry. Connecticut law permitted such charges under obstruction of investigation statutes. The prosecutor, aware of the limitations posed by absence of body, motive, or active cause of death, pursued the narrow charge with methodical restraint. The case, now a matter of public record, shifted from speculation to administrative accountability. Lasker, through counsel, accepted a plea arrangement. He admitted to encountering Elena within the annex, resetting the alarm after escorting her out of what he considered an unsafe section, and failing to note the encounter when police contacted him days later. He claimed he believed the interaction irrelevant once she acknowledged leaving to continue sound mapping in a safer annex wing. He cited administrative overload, multiple inspections, and deteriorating memory under stress. The court acknowledged the absence of evidence tying him to direct harm, but condemned his omission, concluding that failure to disclose contact impeded timely search escalation. The sentence reflected proportionality rather than spectacle: 18 months suspended, 1-year probation, and mandatory archival testimony to support procedural reform in handling industrial site access. The judge, in measured cadence, noted that while the law could not reconstruct a vanished life nor recover physical traces erased by redevelopment, it could enforce clarity in public record. In New Haven, the announcement barely disturbed the winter rhythm. Elm Street cafes continued their steady hum, bicycles lined campus gates, and the rebuilt properties on the former Winchester grounds housed startups and loft apartments with polished concrete floors. Students passing beneath the repointed brick understood little of the industrial silence that once defined the block. Among older residents, a brief letter to the editor surfaced in the local paper, acknowledging Elena's name with solemn brevity. The cold case closure did not generate prime-time coverage or national retrospectives. It settled into a small column on page 3. The Yale Architecture Department organized a private digital exhibition of Elena's remaining field notes, floor resonance diagrams, echo duration calculations, and spectral sketches of factory acoustics. They did not speculate on her final hours nor assign blame beyond what the court had already determined. They allowed her academic precision to stand uninterrupted, a record of a young researcher who listened to buildings and translated their decay into measurable sound. Her family, long relocated from Connecticut, received official closure documentation. It contained the court disposition, timeline reconstruction, audio analysis summary, and acknowledgement of investigative error. There was no memorial service 30 years too late, only a quiet note confirming that the state of Connecticut now recognized the incomplete institutional response that followed her disappearance. In its bureaucratic phrasing, it offered what closure could be provided without discovery of remains or definitive cause. As for the tape recorder, it entered permanent archival storage, preserved not as alleged proof of crime but as proof of sequence, opportunity, and oversight. Its metal frame, once routine, became the hinge on which the investigation turned. When the cold case unit reflected on the resolution, they acknowledged the uneasy equilibrium: a solved case by legal standard, unsolved by existential measure. The city moved on, as cities do, layered in construction and erasure. Beneath repainted brick and landscape plazas, the sonic memory Elena captured remained embedded not in walls, but in the measured cadence of architecture students who still walked Howe Street with portfolios under their arms, unaware of the young woman who once mapped echoes with scientific calm, unaware of the corridor that vanished before truth could fully assemble. The final stages of the case settled into an administrative calm that contrasted sharply with the tension surrounding the rediscovered tape. There were no vigils, no televised reenactments, and no renewed search parties combing through reconstructed industrial lots. Instead, the closure arrived through footnotes, transcripts, and procedural revisions that would outlast public memory. In the wake of the plea agreement, Connecticut's Office of Industrial and Historical Access issued new guidelines for any academic or preservation-based site studies in structures marked partially condemned or undergoing phased redevelopment. Quietly, Elena's name appeared as a reference case in a policy memo circulated to universities, city-permitting offices, and private security contractors who oversaw disused properties slated for redevelopment. The memorandum suggested a newly required tri-signature clearance form, one intended to bridge the communication gaps that once allowed a graduate researcher to enter a structurally unstable corridor without comprehensive documentation. As institutional reform spread, the cold case unit completed its final report. Though lean in narrative, it was dense in attachments, architectural schematics, badge swipe logs, alarm chime interval data, microcassette spectrograms, chain of custody confirmations, and interviews spanning 3 decades. The conclusion neither accused nor exonerated beyond legal parameters. It simply aligned facts with chronology. Elena entered Line C on March 24, 1993. A facility inspector with authority encountered her. The alarm system toggled from override to secure. The building was sealed, and by sunrise March 25, her absence began its quiet drift toward dormancy. What happened between her final recorded notation and the next documented entry in the building log remained undiscoverable. Reconstruction had long erased the physical environment in which she disappeared, leaving the legal determination to revolve not around cause but obstruction. That obstruction, mild in criminal classification yet grave in investigative consequence, became the hinge upon which procedural reflection turned. Retired officers, reading summaries of their own early notes, acknowledged that the industrial redevelopment climate of the era fostered assumptions rather than detailed inquiry. With dozens of warehouses transitioning toward commercial use, the potential irregularity of a single graduate student's presence at a site did not initially register as urgent. The ephemeral nature of the microcassette and the absence of overt threat contributed to the case's original administrative stalling. It was not malice but miscalibration, a quiet underestimation of a missing person timeline that would outlive its environment. In the months following the legal resolution, the cold case team submitted a request to preserve a digital duplicate of the restored recording at the State Archive. Its classification: non-confidential audio reference, investigative. Slight distortion remained, but the key sounds, reverb, chime, lock engagement, footsteps, were intact enough to serve as an example in future forensic acoustics training. Students studying sound decay and spectrographic mapping could reference it in controlled academic settings, not as morbid artifact, but as neutral documentation of architectural sound behavior. To those who did not know its origin, it would appear as nothing more than an ordinary building survey. Only supplemental context would reveal that the voice belonged to a student who never returned from her fieldwork, and that the building whose echo she captured no longer existed. New Haven accepted the resolution with characteristic understatement. Its downtown arcades continued to fill with cafes and graduate reading rooms, while the former industrial block where Line C once stretched now bore mixed-use structures with glass facades and ground-floor bakery counters. In warmer seasons, the sidewalks filled with students holding iced coffee, the air carrying no trace of rusted ducts or eroded timber beams. The presence of a disappeared researcher no longer haunted the geography. The geography itself had been reconfigured. The memory of the case survived only in documents, not in location. The physical coordinates that might have revealed additional context had been erased long before forensic hindsight assigned value to them. Her family, now separated by years and distance, did not return to Connecticut for any formal acknowledgement. A written statement accepted the findings and thanked the investigative team for reapproaching what had once been sidelined. They expressed no public anger and no request for further pursuit, recognizing that the built environment and legal constraints had dictated the outcome. Their daughter's life did not receive a memorial plaque or a scholarship in her name, but her work remained in the academic archive, preserved, annotated, and forwarded occasionally to students researching architectural acoustics. Her notes, meticulously drafted, revealed a mind attentive not to the visual grandiosity of industrial decay, but to its auditory architecture. Each sketch measured the duration of echo as if she were timing the building's memory before redevelopment effaced it. Within the architecture department, A short internal seminar was held that spring. It covered safety standards, site authorization, and pedagogical responsibility. A single slide mentioned Elena's field methods, noting her innovation in matching acoustic decay to structural composition. The seminar did not dwell on the circumstances of her disappearance. It praised the intellectual rigor of her thesis outline, now recovered and archived. Faculty who remembered her were few, but those who did described her with restraint, as was her own academic style, precise, curious, and unadorned by personal indulgence. In the forensic community, the case gained quiet traction not because of its outcome, but because of its methodology. Audio reconstruction without visual corroboration had forced investigators to treat sound as spatial evidence. Workshops at the state training facility cited the recording as an example of how long-dormant media, if properly stored, can retain investigatory value. It became a reference point in discussions on analog preservation, chain of custody integrity, and the necessity of reviewing old evidence with modern extraction tools. The case offered neither dramatic reversal nor celebratory resolution. It offered clarity through accumulation of small, precise verifications. When the final administrative closure was filed, the cold case unit stamped the packet and moved to the next backlog entry. Investigators accepted that some cases achieve only partial illumination, legal closure without physical recovery. In archived minutes, a brief annotation captured the tone succinctly. Investigative objectives met. No further action warranted. There was no flourish, no concluding speculation, no editorializing. The case transitioned from active concern to structured memory. New Haven's skyline continued to shift. Renovated lofts overlooked streets once lined with manufacturing residues. Community gardens replaced lots where rail cars had rested. In the steady pulse of redevelopment, the city did what cities do: absorb disappearance into infrastructure, expand over it, and continue. The echo Elena recorded, measured, deliberate, remained as the only surviving auditory imprint of the corridor that defined her last known location. Long after the court records settled and the tape returned to its archival shelf, the value of her work persisted in a different register. Students who encountered her research understood acoustics not as technical afterthought but as structural language. The case, stripped of speculation and confined to verified data, became an index of what can be lost without malice, what can vanish without witness, and what can be reconstructed without embellishment. Closure did not arrive with final revelation but with procedural equilibrium, acknowledgement of encounter, admission of omission, legal proportion, and administrative correction. The old recorder, once disregarded, ultimately carried the only truth the case could sustain: sequence, presence, and sound. In a city rebuilt over itself, the measured echo she captured remained not in the brick and steel that once produced it, but in the documentation that outlived them both.